The sound is on in there and you can kind of monitor what's going on. Because we have so much in-person testimony, what I always do with these things is I have equal amounts of time for proponents and opponents. So in this case today, I literally have enough time to do 12 minutes of each, and then we have some neutral testimony. So there's 24 people lined up for in-person opponent, which is, there's no way we can possibly get there. So I apologize in advance. But I don't limit any one person to 30 seconds or a minute. I just let you talk and just be cognizant of somebody who's behind you. And try not to be redundant to get the best testimony possible. And that's how we're going to do that today. And then when the time runs out, it just runs out. But that's the fairest way to do it for everybody. So before we get started, just a couple house cleaning things. We have bill introductions, I think, first from Senator Harrison has one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, it's RS 1452. This comes to us from the State Treasurer's Office, and it relates to tax-advantaged savings accounts and programs.
I think we're getting some balance from the other room. Yeah. Committee, any questions or objections to introduction to that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dietrich, I think, has a bill introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm introducing this on behalf of Senator Warren, RS 1649, restrictions on adult registered sex offenders involving schools and school activities.
Okay. Committee, any questions or objections to introduction to that bill? Seeing none, that is introduced. Any other bill introductions? Seeing none, we will move on to our hearing on Senate Bill 254, prohibiting aliens who are unlawfully present in the United States from receiving any state or local public benefits in accordance with applicable federal law. And I'll have Jason Long, our reviser, give us a bill overview. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Senate Bill 254 prohibits aliens who are unlawfully present in the United States from receiving state or local public benefits. There is currently federal law that prohibits individuals who are not lawfully present in the United States from being eligible to receive state and local benefits. And Senate Bill 254 enacts similar provisions with respect to state law here in Kansas. The bill makes unlawfully present aliens ineligible for state and local public benefits, except for the exceptions that are provided generally under federal law. And those are you can receive public benefits in the form of health care services for emergency medical care, short-term non-cash in-kind emergency disaster relief, public health immunizations, and programs and services such as soup kitchens, crisis counseling and intervention, and short-term shelter that has been approved by the United States Attorney General and the Attorney General's sole discretion. There's an added wrinkle with respect to state law that those state and local public benefits do include the reduced tuition and fees at any post-secondary educational institution that would be included. It does not include any license or identification cards that are issued by the Division of Motor Vehicles. Senate Bill 254 would require that any individual who is applying for public benefits submit proof of citizenship, permanent residency, or lawful presence in the United States, and identifies that those documents recognized by the Division of Motor Vehicles when processing driver's license applications would be the documentary evidence provided for application for public benefits. And the bill requires that government agencies verify that the benefit recipient is lawfully present in the United States by using the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program under the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Finally, there is an amendment to a criminal procedure statute under Senate Bill 254 that requires the immigration status be verified for any alien who is charged with a crime. If the person is determined determined to be unlawfully present in the United States, then for purposes of granting or issuing an appearance bond, there would be a rebuttable presumption that that person is a flight risk if they're determined to be unlawfully present. The new law and new Section 1 and the amendment Section 2 would go into effect on July 1st of this year if the bill is enacted. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Very nice and clear description. Any questions? Senator Falscadeau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Jason, denying certain benefits, what are listed? Is it just any?
Yes, the bill basically defines any public benefits and then provides exceptions to what would be permitted. Those are in the first paragraph of the memo in front of you. It's emergency medical care, short-term non-cash in-kind emergency disaster relief, public health immunizations, and the programs and services that are approved by the United States Attorney General, such as soup kitchens, short-term shelter, provision, some of those local programs.
That's in U.S. Code 8-1621.
Yeah, that's all prescribed by federal law.
Correct. Committee, any other questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll check that. Does this include K through 12 education?
Jason?
No, public education is not considered a public benefit.
Correct. Correct. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Jason. Appreciate it very much. We have just one proponent in-person testimony, and that's our Attorney General, Chris Kobach, who happens to be out of town, I think, in Washington, D.C. today. Mr. General, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. We've got you. I'm going to put you up on the clock for 12 minutes, and we'll probably have you stand for questions at the end of your testimony, sir. So go ahead when you're ready.
Happy to do so. And I want to apologize, excuse me, to members of the committee for not being there in person. I had intended to, but then got a phone call on short notice from the White House asking me to come to a meeting here in Washington. So anyway, I'm glad I can do this via WebEx. This, I think many of you have seen a bill like this before, and I think it's time that the legislature pass it. As my written testimony lays out, there's basically two reasons. One is that it's good public policy not to give taxpayer provided benefits to those who are in the country illegally. And secondly, because it's illegal under two different federal statutes. And I'll quickly go through that. Happy to answer any questions. As for the public policy point, is it good public policy to do this, to give public benefits to illegal aliens? I think there are people who disagree. I'm sure some of the conferees opposing this bill will say that that those illegally in the country should be entitled to these public benefits. But I won't spend so much time on that. I think you guys can decide for yourself and weigh the equities there. But it should be noted that it's pretty significant. I've provided some figures in my written testimony. It's about $603 million net that Kansas gives to those unlawfully present in our state. Net means that even if you take out the taxes paid by unlawfully present aliens, we're still $603 million in the hole annually, and that works out to about $509 per Kansas household that is going to those unlawfully here. There's another thing you should be aware of, and that is that Nebraska, Missouri, and Oklahoma have all passed statutes like Senate Bill 254, and so they are not providing as many public benefits as Kansas is. So that provides an incentive if someone unlawfully in the country is trying to decide which Midwestern state to live in, or if the KC metro area, and they're deciding whether to be on the Kansas side or the Missouri side, the Kansas side is going to provide those benefits. So it does provide an incentive, and I'll get to what Congress thinks about that in a minute. But let me jump to the illegal part, because while people in the room may disagree that this is a good idea and think that this is a good idea to provide benefits to illegal aliens, there's no disagreement on the legality of this. Federal statute is crystal clear. There were two different federal statutes both passed in 1996. The first one, which Jason mentioned, is 8 U.S.C. 1621. That mirrors HUSC 1611. It was the Welfare Reform Act of that year. President Clinton signed it. Congress obviously passed it. And it said that not only will there be no federal benefits given to illegal aliens, no state and local benefits can be provided as well. And the statute defines what a public benefit is. It was correctly stated by Jason. It does not include K through 12 education, to answer Senator Falscadeau. Senator Francisco. And for Senator Falscadeau, if you want a very precise list, you can look at the bottom paragraph of the first page of my testimony, and it word for word lays out what federal law, what benefits are considered public benefits that cannot be given to illegal aliens in federal law. And the federal law says not only will the feds not provide it, no state shall provide such benefits. And in that statute, the federal government said it is a compelling government, quote, it is a compelling government interest to remove the incentive for illegal immigration provided by the availability of public benefits, end quote. And that's at section 1601 of the same title. And as was also mentioned by Jason, there's a system that the federal government set up more than 20 years ago called the SAVE system, Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements, that was designed to allow states to comply with this federal statute. And as I say, our neighboring states do, the vast majority of states do. Some Kansas agencies may not be intending to give public benefits to illegal aliens, but they don't screen. They don't determine eligibility at the front end as to whether one is lawfully present in the United States. And so this would simply require the agencies to do what our driver's license division has been doing for more than a decade, and that is simply using the SAVE system, checking from the federal government online. It's very quick, takes seconds to do, and verifying that a person is here legally. Congress also gave the states express authorization to do this in section 1625 of that federal law. All of these sites are in my testimony. So that's the first statute that Kansas is currently violating. The second statute is the one that specifically deals with in-state tuition for those illegally in the country. This is, in 2004, Governor Sebelius pushed for, and the legislature agreed to pass a bill that would give in-state tuition to those unlawfully present in the country as long as they graduated from a Kansas high school, and a few other minimal requirements. There's also a sort of fictitious requirement in Kansas law that says if they file an application to become legal at some time, that makes them, they have to do that too. But of course, there is no application under federal immigration law that would allow someone unlawfully present to become legally present. And so anyway, it's the way Kansas law is written is sort of legally nonsensical. But anyway, it violates federal law. Congress said, and the text of the congressional statute is on the bottom of page 2 of my written testimony, but quite clearly, Congress says that no alien who is not lawfully present in the United States shall not be eligible on the basis of residence within a state for any post-secondary education benefit. That's a direct quote, and it says a little more too. And so Congress, when they passed that statute, the congressional record, was quite clear. The House Conference Report said this section provides that illegal aliens are not eligible for in-state tuition rates at public institutions of higher education, end quote. So how is it that we are standing in direct violation of federal law? Well, when Congress passed this way back in 1996, almost 30 years ago, nobody in Congress imagined that there would be such a thing as a sanctuary state, that states would just ignore federal law and defy federal law. California was the first to do so in the context of in-state tuition rates. Kansas foolishly, illegally followed, but Congress didn't put a penalty in. Congress didn't say, and if you do, you will lose all federal public benefits or whatever penalty they might want to put in. They just imagined that states would comply with federal law because that's what we do in America, right? We comply with the law. But unfortunately, Kansas is not. Some of you may know in 2004, faced with this conundrum, when I was in private practice, I represented 23 out-of-state students attending Kansas universities and tried to bring a case on behalf of these private students saying, hey, we're paying out-of-state tuition, but those unlawfully present in Kansas are getting in-state tuition. And the case was denied on standing. So even though we were correct on the merits, the court said, well, you're not injured, you out-of-state students, you're still gonna have to pay out-of-state tuition either way. And so you don't have sufficient injury to bring this case. And so we're in this conundrum where Kansas and a handful of other states are violating federal law, but there's no penalty provided for in federal law, and there's no way that anyone can sue because the courts will say that you don't have standing. It's no skin off your back if illegal aliens are getting in-state tuition. And so what that means is that it's down to the legislature. Legislatures have to decide if they want to comply with federal law or not. And we all swore an oath when we were sworn into office to uphold the Constitution and laws of Kansas and of the United States. This seems pretty simple to me, but Kansas has been breaking the law for 20 years now in this regard, specifically with regard to in-state tuition, and more broadly with regard to other public benefits. It's coming out of Kansas taxpayers' pocketbooks. Seems like a very easy question to me, but I understand that this is one where some people disagree vehemently on the policy side, but there is no room for disagreement on the legal side. It is crystal clear what federal law says, and it is crystal clear that Kansas stands in direct violation of 2 federal statutes. And I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. General. Committee, any questions? Senator Gossage.
Thank you for being there, Mr. General, and joining us today. I've been hearing the last couple of days some folks saying, okay, we agree with this. You know, we agree they shouldn't have in-state benefits. Why should they? They're in the country illegally. But they're asking about holding the employer who's hiring these folks responsible. Do we have any, is there any federal law, state law that addresses that? Thank you.
There is not state law. There is federal law that prohibits employers from knowingly hiring unlawfully present aliens. That federal law has proven very easy to violate, as I'm sure everybody's aware of. Many of these individuals may not even have a job. For example, the people in school may not be holding a job while also attending school. But regardless, there is a federal statute that prohibits employers from knowingly providing employment to those without work authorization.
Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General, for your testimony. Question, many of us represent parts of the state that have large immigrant communities, children brought here as minors. Is the provision for equating in and out state tuition a curative then of this violation of federal law? Thank you.
No, and so if you look at the, good question, I appreciate it. And if you look at the quoting of federal law on bottom of page 2 of my testimony, I provide the full text of it. And basically what federal law says is that you can't provide in-state tuition on the basis of the fact that the alien resides in the state unless you want to give in-state tuition to every single U.S. citizen who attends your university. And Congress anticipated that no state would want to do that. Kansas is not doing that. We charge, many students out-of-state tuition. And so in order for Kansas to be in compliance with federal law, we would have to give every U.S. citizen at every post-secondary institution in Kansas in-state tuition rates, and we're not doing that. The Kansas statute says, well, we're doing it on the basis of having graduated from a Kansas high school, but of course you can't graduate from a Kansas high school unless you are residing in the state with very minimal exceptions to that principle. So we are in violation of 8 U.S.C. 1623.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay.
I was so used to the Vice Chair Blue helping you
I
out.
get confused myself some days. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney General Chris Kobach, regarding your $603 million of in-state tuition for students, your comment there, was that just for that dollar amount for those undocumented in-state tuition students, or in general? So
that number is not limited to in-state tuition. Yeah, you'd have a hard time getting to $603 million just by counting the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition. Now that figure is all public benefits. And I appreciate your question, because that figure also includes K through 12 education, which of course is very expensive in Kansas. I don't know what the current number is, but it's north of $15,000 a year, I believe, for each student. And so not all of that $603 million per year would be recovered by passing this. You wouldn't be able to recover the K through 12 portion, but a significant percentage of that $603 million would be no longer spent for those illegally present in the United States.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, so, and Attorney General, where did you get that data? And
Oh,
then,
yeah.
and just one, quick question. So this particular legislation, where else, what other states has it passed? And do we care about those individuals that, I know in Wichita where I live and represent that area, there are some individuals that you are referring to in this legislation that have lived there for 30 and 40 years contributing to our economy. So do you care about that piece? And where did you get the data regarding the 600, or the dollar
Yeah.
amount? Thank you.
Yeah, the number, there's a site, there's a link on my testimony. The number comes from the Federation for American Immigration Reform. They've been studying this fiscal impact of illegal immigration for decades now, and they update those numbers every couple of years. Those are 2023 figures, but the link to it is in the first the second paragraph of my testimony on the first page. You asked what the other states are. Off the top of my head, I can tell you, if you're asking states that do give in-state tuition to illegal aliens, I know California still does. I know, of course, Kansas does. I believe, I want to say Illinois does. I want to think Texas was, but they may have stopped. I'm not sure. There's at least 5 or 6 I know that are still doing this, including Kansas. If you're asking what states have expressly have passed a bill like SB 254 to stop giving public benefits to illegal aliens, there's quite a few now, and we should be among them. So again, off the top of my head, you've got Nebraska, Oklahoma, Missouri, Indiana, Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. Pretty sure Tennessee passed it as well. That's almost 10. And these are ones I can remember. I didn't prepare by bringing you the full list. But anyway, the majority of states that have addressed this question are complying with federal law. With respect to your last question about what about somebody who's lived here for 30 years illegally, well, I would say that person hopefully has had a job. I would say that person should leave the United States. That are, if our federal laws have any meaning, then that person should leave. But regardless, if that person has been here for such a long time, hopefully they don't need to make themselves to take advantage of public benefits. And so, this taking away the public benefits from that person who's no longer in K-12 education, probably no longer in college, probably isn't going to hurt them or hurt their pocketbook that much. But the bottom line is federal law says we're not supposed to be providing taxpayer provided benefits. And I think, regardless of how one views the issue of giving benefits, when you think about to those illegally in the country, you legislators have a limited amount of money to deal with. And there are lots of Kansas U.S. citizens who need assistance in one way or another. And the whole point is, in addition to the incentive it creates when Kansas is giving these public benefits and neighboring states are not, there's also the fairness question. Why are we taking taxpayer dollars from our citizens and giving them to those illegally present in the country? I think it's hard to justify that, in my opinion.
Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I do know that myself and a representative have sent an opinion request to you on this because you had stated it in an earlier meeting that Kansas is not currently following the law. So would we even need this legislation if that's the case?
Yeah, as I mentioned, and thank you for the opinion request, and I figured it'd be faster for me to just simply state what is pretty obvious, that we are violating federal law. But the legislation is needed because, as I mentioned, Congress in 1996, when it passed both of those statutes, did not envision that states would just ignore federal law. This defiance of federal law that we've seen in the last 20 years especially is something it wasn't happening in the 90s. And now states, in some cases, like in California, I'd use that example, they routinely defy federal law. And so Congress didn't put a penalty provision in there. And furthermore, because of the nature of public benefits, it's very hard for a private party to bring a case as long as courts are going to say, well, you have to be injured to bring a case, which is what they said in the 2004 case of the Kansas out-of-state students. And since you're not injured if this other person gets a reduced tuition benefit, you're not injured if this other person gets a public benefit in form of some health or housing or all the other public benefits that are covered. And so there's nobody withstanding to sue. And so you have this sort of conundrum where states, including Kansas, are standing in direct violation of federal law. Again, most states, our neighbors, have corrected that problem or have prevented that problem from occurring. But there's no penalty. Kansas is doing this literally with impunity because there is no penalty in federal statute.
So,
Follow up, yeah.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear. So our option is to repeal the law or to find somebody in standing to sue so that we won't be breaking the law.
Well, yes, but the second option really isn't an option because the federal courts, specifically on this very question in Kansas, have said, no, if a private citizen does not have standing to bring the suit. I, as Attorney General, I'm not going to sue the state. My job is to defend the state. And so that's really not a viable option. The option should be a simple one. And if you'd asked a member of Congress in 1996, they say, well, no state's going to break federal law. That's not how our system works. The U.S. Constitution, Supremacy Clause of Article 6 says you can't violate federal law. I think and bear in mind, there's not only the in-state tuition question, but there's all these other public benefits. And the way to stop providing them to those unlawfully in our country is to screen at the application process when they seek the public benefits. So it's incumbent on us to do both, to look at all public benefits and impose the system that the federal government created for the states, where you just check the SAVE verification program every time someone wants a public benefit, whatever it may be. And secondly, let's stop expressly granting in-state tuition rates to illegal aliens.
Time for one more question from Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you gave us the information that I'm looking at from, I guess, FAIR, fiscal information about these costs. So this doesn't include any taxes that those individuals are paying. So these numbers are just the costs. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct, Senator. These numbers are net figures, so they do subtract the taxes paid by those unlawfully present. So this is a net figure. The actual total cost is greater than this.
I would like to see that. I would like to see that, and I hope that if I dig deeper, that I'll also get those costs. So my other concern is it talks about the number of estimated illegal aliens, the number of their U.S.-born children, and then how much they add to a household. So are those U.S.-born children part of that illegal alien household? And then are we looking at the cost of education for individuals who are actually U.S.-born citizens?
That is a very good question. I didn't write the study by FAIR, so I didn't conduct it. I believe the answer, you could go to the website and find the answer for yourself, but I believe the answer is yes, they do count. So the whole household counts. So if there are, two aliens who were born outside of the United States and are here illegally, and then there's a third and a fourth child born in the United States who are U.S. citizens, I believe the whole household is counted in that figure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. General. We're out of time for the questions on your side. Appreciate your testimony and safe travels home from
Thank you very
much. Committee, we have written testimony from 4 others. It is in your S drive. And by the way, on the website, just so you know, not everybody is listed because the website only lists us to 100 pieces of testimony. We had well over. But just for anybody in the audience who's wondering, all testimony is available to the committee to be read on the S drive, which is what we have access to. So just so you know, your testimony, if it was submitted, the committee does have access to it. So that is our proponent testimony. We'll open now to opponent testimony in person. And again, I'm going to do a 12-minute block. And again, so we can have a good, robust questioning period afterward. and we'll get as many people in as we can. So first up is Sister Therese Bangert, Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth, and the 12-minute clock starts right now, Sister.
So I just want to briefly say I've walked the walk with this policy for 20 years. And yes, as General Kobach said, they did bring a lawsuit in the federal court, and it was dismissed. And then he did not mention, I don't think, that the 10th Circuit Court affirmed the lower court's ruling. I was in the gallery when this passed the Senate. I want you to know Derek Schmidt, who is now my congressperson, voted for this policy. And so did Susan Wagle, who went on to be the president of the Senate. I'm going to sum all my things up by the wise words of one of your peers over a decade ago. These are the children that the ways of the world brought to us, and they are now ours. Ward Lloyd from Garden City. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I will try to be as brief as possible, which is difficult for a clergyman, so excuse me. You have my written testimony. I'm not going to go through all the reasons we give there. But I want to point out in my religious tradition, we're to see each person as Christ and to see each family, especially an immigrant family, as the Holy Family who were refugees in Egypt. And this proposed legislation does not live up to our moral obligations to treat the resident alien as we would Christ. And it does not serve the common good of Kansas. Moreover, it fails to live up to the basic tenets of neighborliness and the golden rule to treat others as you would want to be treated. First, I'm a college president. I know the value of education, and repealing in-state tuition for undocumented students would negatively impact educational attainment and harm the Kansas economy. You've seen studies, I know, from the University of Kansas that projects by the year 2030, we will have 34,000 jobs that will need educated persons past the high school level that we will not be able to fill with current efforts. This legislation would balloon that number up and hurt our economy and hurt our communities. Our communities, our economy needs more fully educated people if we are to grow and flourish. According to the Pew Research, there's approximately 80,000 undocumented Kansans. This is almost 3% of our population. Surely no one is foolish enough to want to see Kansas's population and workforce significantly shrink. We will become poor in every way imaginable, morally and economically, if we would fail in our commitment to the common good and our neighbors. The best and the brightest among us, no matter their documented status, should be able to access higher education, and there should not be an economic barrier put in their way. We believe that this bill does not serve the common good, and it does not reflect the historic Kansas spirit of neighborliness to take care of our neighbors, no matter who they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsignor. Up next, we have Mike Taylor, Kansas County Commissioners. Mike.
Good morning, committee. I'm here representing Kansas County Commissioners. That is 360 elected officials in all 105 counties. So I've got Republicans, Democrats, rural, urban. I'm going to take a little different approach. This testimony is not intended to be a comment on immigration or deportation policies. What I want to do is point out how impractical this will be for our local governments to try to enforce. First of all, using the SAVE system, there is a per case charge for that. So you're putting an unfunded mandate on counties if they have to use that. Second of all, just a couple of examples of what is a public benefit. If a kid goes to a county-run swimming pool, is that a benefit? Do we have to check his ID before we let him jump in the pool? What about renting a picnic shelter at the county lake? Is that a public benefit? What about cities that have municipal utilities? If someone comes in and says, I need electric and water service, are we going to have to verify whether they're here legally or not before we let them sign up for electric service? Those are questions that are not addressed, I think, in the federal law that counties are going to have to try to sort through. And some of my smaller counties, it's not going to be possible for them to do that. So not a comment on the policies. I just wanted to point out the impracticality of some of these smaller communities trying to enforce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Up we have next Roshanae Hamby of ACLU. I think I got your name right this time.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the time to testify. You have my written remarks, so I won't go through the whole thing. I just want to talk about 3 points. The first point is a private citizen cannot bring a court case because it's not against the law to provide rates for undocumented people. So I just want to clarify that. 2, what was not talked about by our Attorney General is that this bill would introduce the concept of rebuttal presumption, meaning that someone would have to prove their innocence in order to not be considered a flight risk, which is against our Constitution, which is still valid in the United States. The third point is that this bill talks about using the SAVE Act in context of the criminal legal system. Nowhere in the country is the SAVE Act used in that way, so I wanted to point that out. Lastly, this has already been fought in the Supreme Court in Arizona, which was struck down. This has already been fought in the Oklahoma state legislature, which was struck down. So I'm not sure what the purpose of this bill is and outside of cruelty. So I just want to reiterate that right now, Kansas is providing undocumented students the rate, not tuitions, not scholarships. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshanae. Next, Tim Graham from KNEA.
Good morning. Tim Graham, KNEA. I'll be quick. We do not wish to comment on the portion of the bill that goes into the legal side of things, court, criminal trial, and all that stuff. What we are concerned about with this bill is that it defines state and local public benefit to include reduced tuition and fee amounts offered by post-secondary educational institutions and residents. That's why we're involved in this. We believe in education from pre-K until graduation, however long that may take the student, and we believe every individual has a human civil right to a quality education that fosters their potential, their independence, and their character. In closing, for those of you that believe that this bill is about the rule of law and about justice, I'd like to argue that justice can be tempered with mercy. So go ahead and feel like you have to do this because of the rule of law or because of what you heard earlier by the proponent, but give these kids some grace. Don't take away their opportunity to go to college and receive an education at the same rate that their peers are receiving, their neighbors, their classmates are receiving here in the state of Kansas. These are kids that are born and raised here, and they deserve a chance to get ahead in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim. Melissa Alfonso's list is written. I incorrectly listed as in person. So we'll skip on to Forrest Emke, private citizen. Forrest.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to present. You do have my written testimony that is a biographical statement from a person who has benefited from this program, and I think it is clear why we should support in-state tuition for undocumented people. Our students and schools thrive because of in-state tuition, and undocumented students don't receive any public benefits or scholarships to attend outside of in-state tuition. Thank you.
Thank you, Forrest. Next is Justin Gust of El Centro.
Good morning, committee. My name is Justin Gust, and I'm here today on behalf of El Centro, to express our strong opposition to this bill. For 2 decades now, we have seen our immigrant students complete degrees and certifications that strengthen our workforce and economy in Kansas, paying more in taxes and contributing to growth across all sectors and industries, all without receiving any public student loans or state and federal aid. Cutting in-state tuition adds more unnecessary barriers and ultimately hurts our state by preventing graduating immigrant high schoolers from realizing their full potential and contributing more to our economy and society. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Next, we have Alejandro Range Lopez from New Frontiers.
Thank you. Is this on? Yeah. All right.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'm here representing New Frontiers. I'm the campaign manager for an organization dedicated to getting young folks in Southwest Kansas involved. I'm here in strong opposition to this bill because it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of public benefits and lies pushed forth by proponents meant to villainize people who are simply seeking an equal chance to move Kansas forward. I know I don't have very much time, but I just want to reiterate, undocumented folks receiving in-state tuition don't receive any other public benefit than the in-state tuition rate, right? They don't receive access to loans, they don't receive access to scholarships, any of these grants that are afforded to in-state residents. And by all means and definitions of the word, these students are Kansans. They've grown up in our communities. Senator Clifford, I had an opportunity to speak to you previously, and you know very well, coming from Garden City, that these are students who want to move our communities forward and that our communities would suffer greatly without their contributions. Our communities out west, out in Southwest Kansas, would shrivel and die without the contributions of undocumented folks. I grew up with these folks, I went to school with them, and they're hardworking, right? All I ask is for them to have an equal chance and to have the opportunity to even just pay the same rate that any other Kansan would pay to go to college. And yeah, lastly, right, oppose SB 254 and any other policy pushed forth by Attorney General Chris Kobach, who it seems didn't pay enough attention in his remedial law classes. Thank you. I'm open to questions at the end of this hearing.
Committee, there's only about 20 seconds left, so I don't think that's going to do Marta Silver any good to get up, and if you'd like, I can give you about 20 seconds here. I'm sorry, Doctor.
I'm Dr. Silva. I'm a high school teacher, and this also affects me as a high school teacher. What do I tell my students? That's my question. How do I teach my students? How, are you forcing me to discriminate against the ones who don't have the legal status perceived by the state? So I would like to know what do I do in my high school classes with the students who now will have a higher impossibility to access college. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The 12 minutes is up. And so
I have a few comments.
I'm sorry.
No, wait a minute.
No, I'm sorry, sir.
When I walked in, it says, we have the equal right of those that govern us for us to be involved in this. That's what I saw when I walked in. So I just want to say this.
I can't allow, I cannot allow this disruption.
I am not.
You will either sit down or you will be escorted out.
No,
This has been a
Are you going to give us time to speak?
I'm sorry, the 12 minutes.
You gave someone that's fueling racist legislation 12 minutes. The immigrants who are being targeted here with this legislation, the majority of you calling us illegal aliens are indigenous to the land stolen from them. But you
Clear the room right now. Clear the room. Clear. I'm sorry. We will hear. I will.
give us more time.
Okay, give us a. Okay.
We need more time to speak. You cannot just hear from one side of bigotry and racism and not hear from the people that are affected, whose lands you are all on.
Okay.